Welcome to Face to Face. This is a show about change and what's next. It's a show that asks questions and peels back the layers of our average everyday experience and goes beyond scratching the surface. We interview people doing incredible things who are making a difference around the globe. Join me as we listen in and get one step closer to understanding that big ideas shared create collaboration. Collaboration can inspire community, and communities create social change. I'm David Peck, and this is Face to Face. So my next interview is with Margaret Byrne, and we chat about her new, deeply intimate film, Any Given Day. It is a film that you're going to want to see. This is, as I said, it's a heartbreaking story. It's a heartbreaking. It's about three stories, really, and you can find out not only more about where the film is screening. In fact, it's coming up in the very near future at the Real Abilities Film Festival in New York, April 8th, 2022. Actually, check that out. But look on the site, anygivendayfilm.com. You can find out more about the press around it. You can learn more about what was behind the film. And also, if you're interested in hosting a screening, you can check that out there too. This is, as I said, a very intimate portrayal about mental health issues, incarceration, about our response, not only as individuals, but as families and communities to how we can step in to issues in our own families, in our own communities, and make a difference and make connections. It's a film about community, and it's a film about participation, and it's about, really interestingly, Margaret makes this distinction about how mental health is not necessarily needed to be seen as a weakness, mental health issues, and we often do sort of start there as it's a deficiency, and that's not necessarily an accurate way into this conversation. This is a film about figuring things out in safe places, and as I said, it's about context and about community. It's about accountability, and we get into these conversations about honesty and vulnerability, and how policymakers can make a difference here. This really is about transformation, and too often we see these things as transactional, and that can apply to the nonprofit sector. It can apply to parenting and building communities, and so many things, international development work. And one of the really interesting things I loved about what came out of our conversation is this is about not looking at ourselves as liabilities, but as resources. And how do we do that? And how do we hold ourselves accountable? So buckle up for a fascinating conversation with Margaret, but also a really important film called Any Given Day, anygivendayfilm.com. You can find out more about it there. And also davidpecklive.com for more information about my writing and speaking. And also Face to Face Live is under that umbrella as well, face-to-face-live.ca. You can find close to 600 interviews, lots of great stuff coming up from Hot Docs, even from last year, TIFF. Hot Docs is coming up. I'm about to step into South by Southwest. Lots going on, so many great conversations happening. And please, leave us a review. If you love what we're doing here, iTunes, Spotify, where you listen to podcasts, it's super important that you subscribe to Face to Face, wherever you listen to podcasts, to that feed. But also a simple review would be brilliant. And if you're listening on YouTube, watching on YouTube, a thumbs up, and please subscribe to the channel. We would so appreciate it. But don't touch that dial. Coming right up, Margaret Byrne talking about her important new film, Any Given Day. Well, welcome to Face to Face. We're joined by a very special guest here with us today. We have Margaret Byrne to talk about her new film, Any Given Day, premiering at Hot Docs. And Margaret, thanks for your time today and for joining us on Face to Face. Really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, hey, I'd like to ask, in this crazy COVID world we're living in, we are face-to-face digitally, but it's too bad we couldn't actually have been hanging out at a local coffee shop at Hot Docs here in Toronto. I'm just outside the city. Where are you calling in from today?
I'm in Chicago, on the west side.
On the west side of Chicago. I think there's a lot going on the west side.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, listen, thanks for coming in. So, you know what? Hey, congratulations on the film, and it's a beautiful, poetic, intimate piece. And can you help to give our listeners a little bit of context? I got lots of notes and questions I want to ask you. If you could just sort of paint a bit of a picture for us.
Sure. So It's a film I started making in 2015. At the time, the Cook County Jail was the largest single site mental health facility in the country. And that meant that on any given day, there were 3,000 people getting treatment at the jail. So I started filming at the jail, and through my time filming there, I saw that a lot of the detainees were getting diverted into this mental health court program, something I'd never heard of, and I was very interested to see what that was about. So we spent about 8 months observing the court, and that's where I met Angela, Daniel, and Demeter, who the film becomes about. And it follows their lives over the course of 5 years as they go through that probation program, and then in the years that follow, how they navigate treatment, housing, and all of those things after they graduate and complete this mental health court probation program.
Yeah. So basically from what was it, 3,000 a day to 2 or 3 very intimate stories.
Yeah, yeah. It was, and it was hard to film in the jail
I
uh,
bet.
because at a certain point, once the public defender's office got word that we were there filming in the jail, they didn't want any of their clients filmed, because to an attorney, it's a risk. What if they say
Right.
something? And so that made it very difficult to try and start the film there. And that's what also sort of encouraged me to move to the mental health courts and start the film with people that had been incarcerated at the jail and were now dealing with those after effects, which, it's very harmful to incarcerate people that are in a mental health crisis, if you can imagine.
So is it? I'm pretty sure it comes out in the film, Margaret. But essentially, the issue was in Chicago that the hospitals were full. Therefore, this is really all we can come up with. This is the best solution we have right now. Is that? I mean, it's never that simple, and mental health issues are quite complicated, as we well, hopefully most of us know. But is that what happened? Hospitals full, beds are full. Got to get these folks somewhere.
Yeah, well, it's absolutely about lack of access to care. And what happened is in 2012, the mayor at the time, Rahm Emanuel, closed half of the mental health clinics. And so that left 6 mental health clinics. He closed the clinics in the most economically struggling areas, the South and West Side. And that is why over the next 2, 3 years, the Cook County Jail population surged.
And
And
was
at
that
this
was
point,
Margaret? Was the justification for that just a financial thing, or was like why would a mayor make that kind of what appears to be a pretty crazy decision, like just sort of a blanket
it,
decision?
all I can say is it doesn't make any sense to me. And there were a lot of activists out there trying to stop that from happening. And at this time right now, there's only 5 community mental health clinics in the city of Chicago. But I do know that our mayor, Lori Lightfoot, is increasing mental health funding, but it's needed. I think preventative care, mental health community centers should be as common as libraries. So every community should have one. You shouldn't have to take a bus and a train and a bus to get to your treatment. It should be in your neighborhood.
Yeah, it's great. There's a woman who lives near here, where we're just outside of Toronto, and she believes in this. She runs a community center. Wonderful stuff, wonderful programs. Michelle Knoll's her name, and she believes in this kind of 1 kilometer. I guess that would be 0.6 of a mile for you Americans radius. Like, what can we do right close to home in our backyard? Right, issues seem to be all around us. Hey,
Absolutely.
the establishing shot of your film is stunning. On reflection, back on the film and the story you're trying to tell, was there a little bit of "Welcome to Chicago"? This is way bigger than we realize. Like I'm reflecting back on it now, thinking, you went from 3,000 a day to these several of these very personal stories. and yet Chicago's a pretty big city, right?
Well, what's interesting about that shot is it's filmed from my balcony from where I live from the west
wow.
side. And so that is the perspective of, you know, from the perspective of my home, I can kind of see because I'm in a high rise that where there's not a lot of high rises around us. And I can see um, almost where they all live from that viewpoint. So Demeter lives on the north side of Chicago, Angela lives on the west side, and Daniel lives to the south in Cicero now. Yeah.
And this has been this film, this story. When you started, you didn't. I seem to get the sense that you didn't think you were going to be a part of it. Well, I mean, obviously, you're directing, you're filming, you're producing, you are the film in some respects, but you did not see yourself narrating, appearing on screen. Can you talk about that a little bit and how not only did that impact the story and the filmmaking, but how did it impact you personally?
Yeah, I definitely didn't plan on being in the film. I didn't think it was about me. It's not. It wasn't a comfortable sort of easy decision. It was something that kind of happened gradually, and I think once when I was hospitalized during the making of the film, that's when I started to think like after that happened, it's like how do I tell that story? Is that part of this? And it was really working with our editor, Liz Carr, and my producer, Letitia Dickerson, and our other editor, Rory McFadden, who encouraged me, made it a safe place. And, because you share a lot of things that don't necessarily end up in the film, but in order to get the story out, you have to put it out there. And so it was challenging, but it also, I think, was an important lesson for me as a filmmaker as I continue to do this work is that I now know how it feels to be vulnerable and in the film. And I am proud to stand next to, the people in the film and be a part of the story.
You say up front, and I love this comment or this observation. You say that the way, I mean, you kind of imply that we're all just trying to figure it out, and I think that's absolutely true. Every single one of us, and who hasn't been touched by one form of mental illness or another, right? We all have on some level. We have it in our families, et cetera, and so on. But I love that you say I think what you said is one of the ways you wanted to get to the bottom of this, I guess if you could say, is by making movies, by telling stories, by I don't know, having this ongoing conversation with your viewing public, I guess you could say. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think making films is how I connect with people
Mm.
and connect with my community and build, you know, what I consider family. Because if you film people for multiple years, those relationships are they're so special. I mean, I can't even I don't even know how to describe it, but other than to say they're like family to me. My previous film, which Raising Bertie, which came out on PBS in 2017, I'm still very close to the kids who are now grown men with families in the film, and with the moms, and those relationships are important. And I think have a lot of meaning in my life and how I perceive the world.
That must change the way you film too. I would think. The intimacy. Not only would it allow you, I would imagine, more access, I suppose, and other greater almost opportunity. I would imagine it probably pushes you ethically too. I would think when you make editorial decisions. This is a friend of mine. I'm going to have to be careful how I represent them. Angela is a really interesting case in point. How she sort of steps back from the film. Yeah. You know what? I can't do this right now. I got to step because I don't feel. I guess she didn't feel safe for whatever reason.
Yeah. I think it's hard to be it's hard to tell your story when you're in a vulnerable place, and
Yeah.
certainly when you're in crisis. Um, and I would say one scene in particular in the, well, there's more than one scene, but one scene that comes to mind is when Angela is going to get her son back, and she has to call the police to get him. And she had actually called me as a friend to come and support her. And I was at the time picking up my daughter from school. So I'm like, of course, I'm going to come. But in my mind, I'm like, well, I also have a responsibility as a filmmaker. And so it's just an example of this film was really, that was all that struggle and decision making was always happening, is, pushing between these two roles of being a person who's going to be supportive in their life, who's going to keep showing up no matter what, and making a film, you know. And so balancing those two things. And at one point when we went there, I picked her up. We went to get Anthony, and I did film. But at one point, when I was filming and she was waiting for to see if they were going to bring him, she asked me to stop filming because it was such a painful moment for her. And I did
Yeah, I
put the
bet.
camera down. But then, my filmmaker brain was like, well, this scene isn't going to have an
I, ca-
ending. I
I
have to
can't miss
film
this. Yeah,
this. So,
sure.
I found a way to put the camera back up, and you kind of see even as the scene ends that the camera is kind of showing my feet, and I put it down again, because that's kind of what I was doing the whole process of filming this, is grappling with when I should film and when it wasn't appropriate.
Oh, yeah. And I would think documentarians, well, any filmmaker, anyone who's recording, especially someone's most intimate life, I would hope that filmmakers are asking themselves those questions, and not just, stepping in without, I don't know, without remorse or without thinking through the potential implications, because there's so much trust there.
Yeah, and to me, it's like, I think in a relationship like this, is I always try to give, because I don't want to be just taking. And so I want it to be an exchange, is you're getting something from this. And also you're participating in this, you're deciding how your story is told. I really feel like we made this film together. This is what they wanted it to be about.
Yeah, that's great.
Daniel wanted me to film him going to buy shoes, that was important to him because that's
Yeah,
his
that's cool.
favorite thing. And and so that's what we did.
Yeah, it's cool. I love the family part of it, the community part of it. You in the film as well. At a certain point, the camera is on you. I think you've just maybe come back from your time away in the hospital, and you basically say something to the effect of, this is really hard to talk about. I'd rather not talk about this right now. Thanks very much. So, I mean, talk about empathy, compassionate empathy. Was that a realization for you during the filming? Because early on, I think you say you always sort of looked at mental illness as a weakness.
Yeah,
I would think I would think a lot of people still do, Margaret.
I know they do, and I think it's hard for me to think of all the people that may see this, because I could easily say that there's people that I go, oh, I wouldn't really want them to know that about me, or but I doing this has forced me to really reevaluate that, because I don't think that is the way I want to think about myself or other people. And I think probably I'm harder on myself than anybody.
That's
Um,
probably true. Yep.
but I think spending the time I have with all of them has helped me to also just accept that this is what it is, and that's okay.
I totally hear you about being too hard on yourself, and sometimes that is the hardest job, right? Just self acceptance, self love. I'm
Yeah.
the I am nots scream pretty loudly,
Yeah. Yeah.
don't they? Yeah,
Yes.
it's a troubling thing. You talk about mental health being cyclical, and you use some wonderful imagery for that. I mean, do you mean by that it's going to resurface no matter what you do, no matter whatever kind of care or community you live within? Is that sort of what you mean, that it's always with you?
I can only really speak to my own experience. And for me, since I was a kid, that's how it's been. It's always been a thing that pushes on me, you know. But I also think people can misconstrue that and think that there's no hope. And what I believe is that treatment is something that is can be effective. And
Right.
so there's all sorts of things you can do to keep yourself on a healthy path.
Right. Right.
Sometimes those things are out of our control.
Yeah. No,
So
that makes sense. Hey, I just realized, and maybe it's because I'm just in sort of hot docs mode, but I've forgotten. Did Congratulations on the film. I don't know if I said that out of the gate, and this is world premiere at Hot Docs.
yes, world premiere in the International Spectrum program. Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
that is pretty amazing, and it's a powerful, as I said, powerful, poetic, intimate piece. We're not wrapping up yet, so I hope you still have a few more minutes. But where can people find out more about the film and you? It's bettyfilm.com, BETI. Is that right?
Yeah, BETI Films with an S.com is
And
my
then
production company. And then the film website is anygivendayfilm.com.
beautiful, and eventually, people are going to be able to watch this on PBS as well. They'll be able to see it there, and maybe stay tuned to future festivals as well. Is that a yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. We're hoping that we'll have a strong festival run. So we will be out there.
You'll be out there. It's amazing. So is movie making for you? I hope this is a fair question. A form of therapy in a sense, and maybe that's not the right way to put it. Filmmaking for you is a conversation. That might be a better question.
I mean, I think it's such a big part of my life. I'm always doing it. I live it, you know.
Right, right. It's good.
I'm working on an 8-hour series right now.
I read about that in Variety. Fighting Time, I believe.
Fighting time, and I'm already starting to film season 2. And
Wow.
because it's just all there, and I'm now so entrenched in it, you know. So this morning I was out doing something. This evening I'm going to be out filming. You know, there's something really beautiful about living and making films in the place where you live, because I can go over here for an hour, come back here, do this interview with you, go film something else. It's not like we're going to fly in, we're going to
Right. You're
shoot 14 hours, we're going to get everything we can out of these people, and then we're going to go.
yeah,
I,
yeah.
I don't like to make films that way. I appreciate working on other people's projects. But when it's sort of like the luxury and the benefit of being a filmmaker, director, cinematographer is I can get my cameras and go film whenever something comes up, whenever I, you know, and it's beautiful. And that's kind of how life is, you know. People don't necessarily know, and then they call you and I show up, you know, and those are the greatest moments to be capturing.
I think that's a wonderful. I'm so glad you talked about that, because for me it's about context and it is about community. It's sort of that 1 mile or 1 kilometer radius thing. You're telling stories. This is how close you are to the real work, right?
Yeah,
It's right. It's where you are, and I don't know. Is that a shout out to new young filmmakers? Take your phone, take your Android phone, and get out there and start developing your next film.
absolutely. You
Yeah.
know, honestly, I'll be honest. I've been working on this series for over 3 years now, and I haven't gotten any funding for it. It's
Wow.
so there are you can look at yourself as a resource. You know, you can
It's
look at
good.
all sorts of things as resources. It's not just about bringing in the money. Of course, fundraising and funding is critical. You know, it can't be done without some amount of money, but even any given day, it took me years to bring in money. So the film would have never happened if I waited for somebody else to say, I get this, I see this, why don't you do this? And I don't want anybody to give me the okay. I'm going to do it if I'm going to do it, you know. kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah, no, it's great. I so love that. I interviewed Cody Westman today about his new film Hell or Clean Water, and it's all about doing it. It's all about stepping in, taking the plunge, rolling up your sleeves. Use whatever cliche you want, but the work is important, and step into your future, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and that's what's so beautiful for me about your film. I mean, you got, I don't even know where I'm going with this, but you raised the question for me, how does somebody live with this kind of mental illness who isn't in a community every day? How do you get out of bed in the morning when you're suffering from bipolar disorder, suicidal tendencies, depression, anxiety, in this time of isolation during COVID? I mean, the escalation is just so significant. Do you have any insight on that? I mean, I think we sort of hear that at the end of the film, but I'd love to hear, Margaret, some of your thoughts on, are there sort of tools that people can use to help?
Yeah, I think part of it is just having somebody who is going to hold you accountable and is going to see you in those moments, because it's easy to sort of hide and not be seen if you don't want to be seen, and that's where I think you can spiral down. At least for myself.
Is it, would you say that's distinctive to some types of mental illness more than others? This idea of, there's a scene where I think Demeter says he just doesn't want to go to any class. Like, it's just any classes. It's just like it's almost like shutting down. And I mean, I've suffered from depression. I would call it probably more anxiety, and just it. It's a challenge. I don't want to equate any of my issues with Angela or Daniel or yourself, but that's to my earlier point. We've all kind of touched these things in some way, shape, or form, and my first inclination is not to pick up the phone, and yet that's exactly what I need.
Yeah.
You end the film talking about connection and how important that is. Yeah, how do we continue to water that seed?
I've only figured out how to do it through my movies, and that is sort of like my savior in a way. Making the series I'm making, um, I it's a important, it's such an important part of my life. I care so much about what happens to the people that are in it, and I'm deeply connected to them, and now very deeply connected to the Latinx community that I really was not engaged with before that, despite the fact that I've lived here a good part of my life, and am from here. So I think we all need to find our own ways, our own flavor of how to do things like that. But for me, I find it in doing this work. And I think the work to me is about contributing something to the places where so much has been taken.
Mm. A Canadian Indigenous writer said that Richard Wagamese said, and I so love this quote: "Stories are meant to heal." Did you find, as you went on shooting this film, I think you said over a 5-year period, and getting to know, this new family of yours, did you see some of that happen in the moment? Or sorry, over in the moment and over time, I guess is the question. Did you see some healing taking place? The power of, as you say at the end of the film, there's power in connecting, right? That's so great.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think for all of us, we've talked about it. This project and just the act of doing it has benefited all of us in some way, um, and has been healing. For Angela to be able to take ownership and tell her story in her way, rather than say how the newspaper printed what happened, that led to her incarceration. There's power in that, to understand who she is as a mother, and all the things that make up her life that aren't just this one incident, or the illness that she was diagnosed with that perhaps wasn't accurate. If you're in jail and you're in solitary confinement and you get diagnosed with psychotic disorder, you have to question, like, well, what led to that?
There must be such a lack of trust too, I would think, within the system itself, right? Well, why? Oh, you're just misbehaving, or you're looking for a way out, right? I would imagine there is very much a cliche response to, or maybe a very insensitive and cliched response within the prison system to folks with mental health issues.
Well, what I really took away from my experience being there is that people don't fully trust the treatment providers at the jail because
Interesting.
they're incarcerated. It's not exactly a safe place, so you're not going to be honest and vulnerable when you can be sent to prison.
Yeah, honesty and vulnerability. It seems to me that really is healing is rooted in that. Great communities rooted in that. Great conversations are rooted in that. It's just it's so fundamentally important.
And
I,
one thing that it made me think about is, in the film, Angela, you find out that through this whole mental health court program, she wasn't taking her medication.
mm,
And the reason why there was this disconnect is because why on earth would you trust a system that put you in jail in the first place for your mental health crisis? And now they're saying, be open, but we're going to report it all to the judge and to the system that incarcerated you in the first place. And so, of course, she didn't trust them. Of course, it took her another round of trouble to get back on her feet because she had to do it for herself, not for them.
right. Yeah, which is so important because it seems to me to break out of that, there has to be the support mechanisms, but there also has to be that own personal, intentional step towards healing. Right.
Yeah,
It's
and I don't know how you do that by
yeah.
mandating it through a court. So
Right.
that's the tricky part of it.
Well, it didn't was it Daniel near the beginning of the film said something to the effect of, how can I be mentally ill and a criminal?
Yeah,
Uh,
that's Demeter. Yeah.
was it Demeter? Yeah.
Yeah, and he writes about that in his book State of Schizophrenia. So it's like, well, you incarcerated me, you put me in jail, you told me I'm a criminal, and now you're telling me, no, it was your mental illness. You were in a state of mania. Doesn't make any sense. And to your point, when he got mad about not wanting to go to classes, it's because he was tired of doing
Sure.
checking all the boxes for
Yep.
them and feeling like it's not working. Not to say that it wasn't working. I think it was overall a positive experience for him, but it's a lot of it takes a lot of effort to get to court as much as you have to report.
Margaret, is there a sense in which is it still that classic, almost cliche that the system treats us like numbers and just boxes to tick off because everyone's busy and we all have jobs and that's sort of the cynical approach. Oh, okay, well I'll help you to a point, right? It's almost anti-relational in a way, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's all transactional.
Transactional. It's good.
It's all transactional, and it leads me to think about my series Fighting Time, which is about dozens of Latino and Black men from the West Side that were allegedly framed with murders they didn't commit. And I think you could say, well, how could that possibly? Sorry, that's my Alexa. How could that
Okay.
possibly? How could that possibly be, right? But if you think back in the 80s and 90s, there's 900 murders per year in the city of Chicago. And then you start to think at the patterns and practice that were happening in the Chicago Police Department, especially back then. Uh, and 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 once you really dig into some of these cases, it's astonishing how easily you can throw away a life so that the mayor can get up there and say, we're clearing cases. Superintendent can get up there and say, well, we've got a problem, but we're clearing murder cases. um, and that's a numbers game, and it has destroyed so many lives. And then it also leaves the person that actually committed the crime out on the street because it's not
Right.
actually about finding the truth. It's about winning. Same thing with the state's attorney's office. You know, it doesn't matter if you have the right person. It matters that you have somebody. And all the better that if it's a gang member, they're a throwaway anyway, you know? So,
Mm.
and that's what we're finding has happened over and over and over. And it is just unconscionable.
We're going to probably have to wrap up in a couple minutes here, and always, I'm starting to think that, Margaret, that the sign of a great conversation is that it's unfinished. That we barely scratched the surface on your film, on the issues, on getting to know each other, on this conversation. So let's hope there is another one for us down the road. Where do you land? Is it more policy? Is it more top down first before grassroots and bottom up, or is it got to be both? And it usually is, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that from a wider sort of. And I would imagine every city, every country is going to be different.
Yeah, I mean, I think both sides of it is important, but I truly feel like my place is with the people, and I enjoy most working with people on a daily, level and getting to know them in a deeper way, so that I can effectively tell their story, in the most authentic way. So my heart is definitely with the people that are going through it, But it doesn't mean that that's the only story I'm telling. I'm looking at the whole structure of it all. I'm very interested in talking to the policymakers and the people that are in positions of power.
Yeah, it's really a wise approach, it seems to me, because it's kind of a both. It has to be a both and. I mean, if it's about, and I think I'm so glad you talked about one of the best things you love about the way you approach film is you just sort of you don't need to get on a plane to tell the story. I love that, and I think that's a really important lesson for all of us to take away. If you want to change the world, I don't know, just open the door and have a look.
Yeah, you just have to start. You just have
You
to
got to
start.
start somewhere. I mean, you end the film beautifully with this idea that people can look ordinary and still be carrying that mental illness, that baggage. There's just this idea that there's so much more going on than meets the eye is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, thank you.
We've been talking with Margaret Byrne here today on Face to Face. Her new film, Any Given Day, is at Hot Docs. Make sure you check it out, Margaret. What a pleasure having you on the show today. It really and can you tell us a little bit about the more about the series Fighting Time before we let you go, or when's it airing and etc. How do we get to see it?
So we're still looking for distribution. I'm hoping that it'll find a home on a streaming platform, or premium cable, I think. And we're following half a dozen cases through the post-conviction process now for the last 3 years. So we actually just filmed in court yesterday, the first time we were back in-person court. So it's a good sign that things are starting to open up here in Chicago.
Good.
And yeah, I think the one thing that commercial entities and distributors don't really want to take on is the risk of time. And, with a wrongful conviction cases, you don't know how long they're going to take to resolve. But
Right.
that's something that I think, I have no problem sitting with this until there's resolve in their cases, and following this until we see, what happens. And I think, right now we've been in court for almost 3 years, and we're getting ready to see some of these cases, get to the final evidentiary stage. So that's very exciting to see that things are starting to happen in these cases.
That's amazing. It sounds like a marvelous story, important again, and very, very personal. And I so love your commitment, and I so admire the commitment of documentarians everywhere. Like there's a real stick to itiveness that this type of storyteller has that I don't think other storytellers necessarily have. So thanks for that. And if you want to find out more about Margaret and the work she does, Birdie Films with an S plural .com is where they can. Sorry, Birdie. Where did that come from? That must be the Street Gang, Sesame
Well, that's
Street
my
film.
movie, Raising Bertie.
There you go, Raising
Yeah.
Birdie.
So
There's
it
lots
came
of
from
crossover.
somewhere. Yeah.
It came from somewhere. That's
Yeah.
right. Margaret, what a pleasure having you on the show today. Thanks so much for your time. Margaret Byrne, and Any Given Day.
Yeah, thank you.
So there you have it, my conversation with Margaret Byrne and her important and intimate new film, Any Given Day. Find out more about it, anygivendayfilm.com. You can find out about the next screening, which is happening in April at the Real Abilities Film Festival in Manhattan. And I'm sure there's going to be more screenings coming up. In fact, you can host your own. So check that out. Follow them online and learn more about Any Given Day. And like I said, super important film, and what a great conversation with Margaret. Thanks, Margaret, for joining us today on Face to Face. Don't forget davidpecklive.com for more information about my writing and speaking, face-to-facelive.ca for a whole host of other interviews. Lots of great stuff coming up. Please, one request is, if you can't do anything else other than, listening and getting this far, please leave us a review. I would so appreciate it on iTunes or Spotify, and sign up wherever you listen to podcasts and socially mediate the heck out of us if you can. We'd appreciate that too. But a review really does go a long way. Thanks for joining us today and for listening in on this wonderful interview with Margaret Byrne about her new film, Any Given Day. And we will be back with you very soon here on Face to Face.